Really welcome if you're just joining us. Feel free to share in the chat where you're joining us from. This is a little midweek productivity pep session called Unstick Your Productivity. So if you haven't come across me and my stuff before, I'm Graham Allcott. I'm the founder of a company called Think Productive. We work with businesses to help them to reimagine work, make space for what matters, and just do good stuff. We've got a whole range of workshops that can help with that. If you want to find out more, just go to thinkproductive.co.uk. And my personal website is on there as well, grahamallcott.com. And you can find out more. If you want to do a bit of online stalking while you're on this webinar, grahamallcott.com/links. We'll just give you links to like everything I'm doing. But I'm the author of a few different books, most notably one called How to Be a Productivity Ninja, which has been an international bestseller. What's really lovely is just getting emails from people all over the world telling me about their productivity escapades having read that particular book. So I'm going to give you a few bits and pieces from that book and from a couple of our workshops today. And then I'm going to leave plenty of time in this session to really just to have you just fire questions at me. I'm sure many of us will have the same kind of challenges. So we'll spend a bit of time fixing some stuff as we go through. So I mentioned Productivity Ninja there. So this whole kind of area of work that I developed a few years ago, and I kind of put all the best stuff that I knew really into How to Be a Productivity Ninja, and then did a revamped version of that in 2019. That has led to a whole bunch of other work, and a lot of the stuff that Think Productive does really has that kind of theme. But really the idea is there are 9 different ways that we can think about our work. So we've got 9 characteristics of the Productivity Ninja. I'm going to touch on 2 or 3 of them during this session. But really the aim of this session is to focus on where you might be stuck, what we can do about that, how we can just, unstick and kind of free ourselves from some of those things that hold us back. So I did, if any of you are on my Rev Up for the Week email, you'll know a couple of weeks ago I did a Rev Up for the Week Sunday email, which was called Why No One is Smashing It in 2024. And it was really inspired by everyone I talked to, from clients to family members to friends, colleagues. Everyone I was talking to was having just like a really bad start to the year, a really miserable January. And, the days are short, it's dark. And it just feels like I know I should be doing like all this stuff and I'm just not. And I know I should be, refreshed from Christmas and just like running at 100 miles an hour. I've got all these New Year's resolutions and I'm just not. And it just felt like this one particular week, it was just coming up everywhere. And I was feeling it too. My parents were both ill. Lots of stuff was going on in my personal life too. So it just felt like this is just the zeitgeist. This is kind of everywhere. And it had a really strong reaction. So I'm going to share with you a few things that I think can help us to start smashing it in 2024 and start just having a better experience. So if that's you, you're in the right place. Let's start with procrastination. Where does procrastination come from? So if you know Productivity Ninja, if you know my stuff, you've probably come across the term lizard brain before. Lizard brain refers to the amygdala. It's the bit of the brain at the back. If we think about back to biology lessons at school and all that, it's basically the part of the brain that gives us fight or flight, and it's the animalistic part of the brain. This is really important when it comes to procrastination. And it's a very powerful part of the brain that really gets in the way of a lot of our work. A couple of examples of how that might happen. So if you're ever in some kind of work meeting where everyone's going around and everyone's saying their name, and it's kind of getting to you and everyone's just saying their name and then what they do, and it gets to the person just before you, and you hear that little voice in your brain just going, Graham, don't screw this up. Say your name properly. Say your job title properly. Then that's the lizard brain. The lizard brain is because it's the animalistic part of the brain, really determined to fit in and not stand out. It's really determined to avoid anything that involves being judged. And also because it's the animalistic part of the brain, it doesn't really want to do any work until we really have to. We don't really want to go and forage for food until we start to feel hungry. And so, like, we inherently have this slightly lazy part to our brain. So the lizard brain tells us lots of stories and lots of things that get in the way of our work because those stories are what make us procrastinate. So when we think about, well, like just to give a very personal example, when I think about my Rev Up for the Week email or when I'm writing a book, the hardest part is the pressing send and the releasing that idea out into the world, because we know that if we do that, we might be judged. Some people might unsubscribe from the email list. Some people might write a 1-star review about the book. And that instinct to protect our work and stop our work from being judged becomes a really important factor in procrastination. So how do we deal with that? So there's a couple of things that I think really help. One thing that can really help is to just get to know your lizard brain better. There's a million ways to do this, but a really good way is mindfulness, meditation. It's also exactly the same if you go out for a run, if you are in the shower, just take that moment to just be really present in that thing that you're doing, and just listen to your gut and just listen to the thoughts that are coming up in your head. And often for me, it's like, oh, I'm a little bit scared about that thing, or I'm a bit worried about that, or I don't quite know what I need to be doing. So just kind of getting present and just recognizing that we have these thoughts and just tuning into that can be really helpful. I'm also a bit of a fan of Julia Cameron, who wrote a book called The Artist's Way. She has this technique, which is called the morning pages. So every morning you just basically write free flowing, just whatever's in your head, just get whatever's in your head out onto the page and just kind of a bit of a kind of internal monologue thing. And you'll quite often, when you do that, just get into a state that feels quite mindful, and you'll start to notice, oh, I'm actually worried about that. I'm procrastinating about that. Also, when you are looking at your to-do list, what's the item on your to-do list that makes you go, and you kind of tense up? Like that's the thing that you're probably procrastinating about. Also, obviously, just as you're reviewing the items on your list, hopefully you're doing a regular review of that. And what are the things that have been hanging around for a bit too long? The things on your to-do list that are you just treating them like pets? Because they're not pets. We want to get rid of them and tick them off. So if you feel like you're carrying certain tasks around, putting them off, then those are likely things to where there's something bigger going on. There's some kind of lizard brain thing going on. So just getting in tune with that lizard brain, I think, is absolutely vital. And it's surprising to me how few people actually do that. So I think if you can really do that regularly, you'll really have an edge over so many people just by doing that. And then there's a couple of diagnostic tools that can really help too. So this is a thing from Productivity Ninja. It's one of my Ninja ruthlessness techniques. And it's just a really simple acronym. It's a diagnostic tool to help you work out why you're procrastinating. And it's just simply DUST, DUST. So is the thing just difficult? Is it undefined? And I'll come back to undefined in a second. Is it because it's scary? Or is it because it's just tedious? And there are different approaches that we need to take in order to, once we've recognized that, there are different approaches that we take in order to overcome that, to unstick it, and to stop ourselves procrastinating. If something is too difficult and we've recognized that that's the issue, that's the blocker, then what we want to do is change the thing that we've got written down on our to-do list from it being an item where we're doing that thing to an item where it's like we're seeking advice, or we're getting training, or we're learning, or we're modeling, where we're in some way plugging that knowledge gap that we have. So when something's difficult, we just have a knowledge gap with it. So what is the thing that I can do that just raises my knowledge level, raises my skill level, so it's not difficult, and make that the action. So once you do that thing first, then you can come back to the thing that you're struggling with, and it will just feel much easier. So things like just getting advice from someone who's done it before, or watching a quick YouTube video about it, or just like really just, reading up about it so that you kind of figure out different approaches, different ways to tackle that thing. So if it's difficult, work out what the knowledge gap is. What's the bit of knowledge that you need? What's the bit of expertise that you need? Go and find that first. So if it's difficult, that's the route to take. Undefined, it's about getting some clarity in the actions. I'm going to give you a bit more detail on that in a moment. But just so often we have these things that just feel nebulous. They feel big. They feel kind of like blobs on the page. And what we really want to do is do the extra bit of thinking that makes that stuff crystal clear. So if you've got just a vague idea of the thing you want to do, really just spending a bit of time mapping that out, pen and paper, Excel, like however you like to do it, but just really putting some detail to that will really, really help. So just often because we're so busy, we don't do quite enough thinking. And often the more we think about our work, the easier it becomes. So just adding that extra bit of thinking, extra bit of rigor, extra bit of clarity really, really helps. Something might be scary. So, perhaps we're worried about something that we're doing for the first time, or it's a thing where we're really putting our neck on the line, or we're having to stand up and do a talk in front of people, whatever it might be. Sometimes things are scary. So how can we make it less scary? One of the things that works, which is quite counterintuitive, is basically you find a bigger fear. One of the ways to do that is, so let's say if we think back to times where we had like a deadline at university or at school or whatever, and it's like, I'm scared of being judged for doing this essay. But actually, if once I'm doing that thing, once I get close to the deadline, it's like, now I'm going to really focus down on just getting it in and hitting the deadline. I'm more scared of missing the deadline than I was of actually the mark that I might get or how it might be judged. So if you think about that in a work context, one of the things I've sort of used over the years is like putting a deadline in someone else's world or making someone else aware of that thing. So a good example of that is like setting up a meeting that says, hey, next Friday, can we discuss the work that I've done on XYZ? And you haven't even started the work yet, but it's like knowing that that deadline is in someone else's world in a week or so's time will actually you'll be so scared of the idea of turning up to the meeting and having nothing that you'll make a start. So sometimes creating a bigger fear is the way to handle it. And in other cases, it's like, again, how can I get some mentoring, some advice, like just some support? Often it's emotional support rather than necessarily skills-based support when it's a fear. But just figuring out what can I do that will just make this thing less scary. And then tedious, it's like, why does my mum do the ironing while EastEnders is on? It's like, it's the most tedious job, but it's like, if I've got something else to make that fun. So the thing I'll do quite a lot with that, and I've got a coach who's working with me on a few things at the moment around marketing. And she said to me recently, like, because I really don't like being on LinkedIn, but I know I need to be on LinkedIn, right? And it's just tedious to me. So she's like, Graham, put some jazz on. She knows I like jazz. Miles Davis, shout out. Put some jazz on, just crack on with it, 20 minutes. So she just makes it feel like it's less of a tedious thing. There's going to be some kind of fun element as part of it. So difficult, undefined, scary, tedious. When you are procrastinating, just think about which of those four it is. There will always be one that it's like the predominant one. And then from there, you've got some tactics, you've got some different ways to solve that problem, which then makes the actual unsticking much easier. And I just want to drill down just slightly more into the undefined thing, because this is a really important thing just around productivity and around the productivity ninja approach. So with everything that we work on, we always need these two things. So with everything you're working on, you need to define what is the desired project outcome. A good way to think about that is, how do I know when the project is done? And once I've got to that outcome, I can then say, right, I can shut this down. This is complete. Making that project outcome as specific as possible, giving it some clarity, giving it some numbers is often a good idea. So it's not just like run conference, it's run conference for 100 people that generates X amount of revenue. So just putting some specifics to that will just really help you to know, like, have I achieved this? Is this done? Is this really finished? And then the next thing that you always need is the next physical action. And when I say the next physical action, the word physical is really important there. So imagine yourself, particularly when you're stuck, this is a really good tip as well. Like, imagine yourself sat at your desk and you're a fly on the wall looking at yourself, and imagine you've started that thing. What does starting look like? Does it look like Googling? Does it look like writing down? Does it look like picking up the phone and calling someone? Like, just think about the physicality of that action. And often once the brain can start to picture ourselves actually having started, then that's like half the battle, because then it makes it much easier. It means that we don't have that slight kind of vagueness or that kind of blocker when we look at our to-do list. And guess what? If you've got a to-do list where everything is voiced in next physical actions, and you're being really specific about all those things, when you're looking at your to-do list, it's really hard to look at it and go, Oh, don't really know what to do there. I'll move on to the next one. Oh, I don't know what to do there. It's really easy when you look at that list to think, right, I can pick that one out. That's a 5-minute one. That's a 20-minute one. You just get more momentum by the fact that you've got next physical actions written down. So really good tip, getting really specific about stuff. So this really talks to the middle chapters of How to Be a Productivity Ninja, where I talk about the chord model, capturing and collecting, organizing, reviewing, and doing. And really capturing and collecting is about saying, right, all those different things that I need to work on, let me first get them out of my head in whatever vague form of words I need to. I will often have little post-it notes that just have like one word written on them. But then the next phase is the organizing, which is basically asking yourself these good questions, these good organizing questions. And particularly, okay, what's this working towards? What's the desired project outcome? And then what is the next physical action? So just asking yourself those two really simple questions about every single thing that you're working on will just give you momentum and stop you from getting stuck and procrastinating about those things. Cool. I'm going to talk about a couple of other things, and then I'm going to throw it over to some Q&A. So if you've got some questions, start typing them in the chat, typing them in the Q&A box. So often I'm asked, what is your definition of productivity? Like, how do you define productivity? And I think there's kind of two ways I answer that question. The first is like the really obvious thing of like trying to get the maximum output for the input that you have, right? And so you measure productivity by basically like how easy can you make your work? But the second one, which is a slightly more esoteric answer to that, but it's the one I like more, is that productivity is making space for what matters. Productivity is making space for what matters. I think one thing we really undervalue in our society, particularly in a world of 24/7 information and scrolling and just all this kind of full kind of mindset that we have, is the idea of the strategic value that clear space can have for us. So really just the value of clear space is just something I think it's really magical, actually. So there's a bunch of things I do that I find really helpful around this. So the first is just try and get smart with some of your productivity habits. So things like not checking your email all the time will give you more space at your desk. Try not to have a bunch of different windows open that don't relate to the thing that you're working on. Try not to have a bunch of paper that's kind of cluttering up your desk. Like all those kind of simple little things will just give you a little bit more clear space, and just mean that when you're working on something, or when you're stuck and you need to unstick, you've got the maximum brain power to throw at that. You don't have 100 other little things that are just kind of in your peripheral vision that you're thinking about. One other thing that's really great for creating clear space is having a to-do list app that you're able to just chuck everything into. So once you get everything into the app, then you can focus on things one at a time. We might have 100 things to do, but we only really want to work on them one at a time. Multitasking is a myth. So how can you just put all those things to one side, trust that you're going to come back to them, but know that you don't have to put any of your energy and attention on those things at a particular moment? And then the other thing that I think is really valuable, and it comes back to that idea of how do we get to know our lizard brain a little bit more, is really making the time to experience mental clear space in our day, in our week. So that might be going for a run, going for a walk in the morning, having regular breaks, taking a proper lunch break, like an hour, not 10 minutes. But just those things that give you a little bit of space. I think what's really empowering is being able to take that full lunch break, being able to leave on time in the evening and not work late into the evening. Going for a run in the morning, doing those things from a basis where you don't feel guilty about them. So often we have good intentions to do that stuff, but then it's like, well, I don't have time to go for a run today, I'm so busy. But actually, what we need to do is look at that as like, you're going to feel guilty about that because you feel like there's so much to do. But if you can look at that time where you created space as being really valuable, and it will probably solve some problems for you, you can almost look at that going for a run, or that blocking off on time, as being an investment in your future productivity and a creation of space that might solve problems right now. So if you can see it in that way, then for me personally, it helps me to not feel guilty about doing that stuff. And yes, there are still days sometimes where I'm like, oh, I really don't have time to go for a run today. But guess what? Every single time I do go out for a run, or every time I go for a walk in the woods, like I never ever regret it. So by the time I come back, I've solved some stuff. When I'm writing books, I'll tell you the one place that I do most of the structuring of chapters and really figure out where everything goes together, or the contents list or whatever, is when I'm in the middle of a run. I'm totally serious. So I'll have my phone with me and I will I'll kind of send myself voice notes as I'm on the run, just send them to myself. But like there's something about when you have clear space, when you're not consciously working on stuff, your brain will work on stuff for you and really kind of fix stuff. So that clear space is so valuable and really strategic. It's why every away day happens somewhere else, like not in your office. It happens somewhere with, a nice view, mountains, sea, whatever it is. That's for a reason, because clear space just really stimulates something in the brain that really, really helps us. So productivity is about making space for what matters. And the ultimate way that we make space for what matters is we say no to a whole bunch of stuff. So a great way to unstick the things that you really want to be working on this year is start writing a I'm not going to do list. Start writing a these are things I need to avoid list. Whether that's something really simple and habitual like scrolling, whether that's really looking at your projects and really working out like which ones have the most impact. We really need to get much more honed in on what are the few things that I need to do that really add the most value, and really kind of cut down on lots of the other stuff. And there's a lovely quote from Warren Buffett who says, the difference between successful people and really successful people is the really successful people say no to almost everything. And I think that really is, for me, like productivity 101 is actually about what you say no to, not what you say yes to. And the final one, just as a bit of a food for thought, really, is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is where I am totally motivated myself to do this thing. I enjoy this work, or I really see the value of this work. Extrinsic motivation is when I'm doing this basically for someone else, or for some other reason. So are you doing this because it's this? That's the intrinsic motivation. I love doing this, I'm going to do it. Or am I doing it because there's some kind of reward in the future, or it's like a means to an end, or whatever? And we need to just really have a different approach around how we motivate ourselves around that, because obviously intrinsic motivation, really, really easy. We'll just do it anyway. Extrinsic motivation, we probably need some kind of external accountability or some kind of external mechanism that really drags us through that work. I'll give you an example. For me is I do a lot of running. I actually hate running. Like I really hate it, but I just know that I need to be doing something around fitness. I know I feel good afterwards. I know it's good for my mental health and everything else. So what I do is I sign up for the Brighton Half Marathon. The fittest I am every year by far is between like December and February, because I'm like training for that half marathon. I'm actually on the lookout for how can I find another half marathon at sort of like October, November in the year that drags me through that part of the year doing the running. But yeah, I just think we really need to think about this idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. There's a really good book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, who talks a lot about habit design. And inherent within habit design is like, is this something that I think will be really easy for me to stick to because it's an intrinsic thing? Or is this something where I'm really going to need that kind of extra layer of accountability, or someone else to kind of hold my feet to the fire? I really hate marketing. It's just like I just hate marketing. Like it's just as simple as that. And I've hired a coach who is her sole job. And I told her this when she started, was like, I hate this stuff. I just need to have a call with you once a month where you just hold my feet to the fire. And I say, right, these are the things that I need to really focus on, and like I'll have it done next month. And it works. Like I turn up on these calls and it's like I'm working on stuff that I would never otherwise have the intrinsic motivation to do. So I think recognizing that can be really, really important as well. Okay, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Just before we go to questions, I'm going to tell you about a couple of things. If you are really struggling with your productivity, or you just want to get clearer, crisper, like just more in line with your values in terms of what you're working on, then I run this once a year. It's called 6 Weeks in Ninja. And you can just take a little QR code thing, just take a photo of it with your phone right now. It's a 6-week program. It happens on Wednesday evenings. It's a couple of hours on Zoom, and then we have a WhatsApp group, a community that kind of holds everybody accountable through the week. That's what we cover on each of the 6 weeks. And really the idea is by the end of it, we'll have implemented all the stuff that's in How to Be a Productivity Ninja. You'll have a really good system set up for doing your own productivity and managing your own stuff. There's usually a bit of wine and a few tears at different points as well, because it can be really transformative in just terms of thinking about how we work. So I do this once a year. Scan the QR code there if you want to find out more. And if you use the 10% off code webinar, then you get 10% off. There's also, if you're here and you work for a charity, there's this kind of self-selecting charity discount thing as well. But yeah, 6 weeks to Ninja. Would love to have you with us. And my promise to you with that program is you will absolutely transform your productivity. It will just be a very different feeling going into work at the end of that week 6. Probably, to be honest, by the end of about week 3, you'll be really cooking. So if you want to join us for that and really start to see some benefits, particularly if you're one of those people who, like 5 years ago, you bought 6 Weeks to Ninja. Sorry, if you bought a couple of years ago, if you bought How to Be a Productivity Ninja, and then it's just kind of sat on your shelf and you haven't really read it and you feel like you should, we literally go through the book and we just implement all the stuff that's in the book. So, and you'll do that with me. So if that is of interest, then check it out. Couple of questions there about pricing and stuff. There are a couple of different discounts and prices and stuff. It's all on the QR code there, and you'll find it from there. And then a thing that Think Productive is doing. Think Productive over the last year, we have set up 3 levels of leadership and management programs. This is level 2. We start in April. This is designed for, so if you're a middle or an operation or departmental manager or a senior manager, then we have a kind of level 3, which is around the kind of C-suite CEOs. There's 20 places on this program, and it starts in April. So it's called the Influential Leader. And what we've done is we've created leadership and management programs that bring in the kind of productive thinking, productivity ninja kind of approach, but also really focus on your role as a manager, your role as a leader, and how can you really kind of up your game in terms of those roles. So if that's of interest, there's a little QR code for that as well. So scan that one and find out more. It's the tickets are £3,000. It starts in April. It's limited to just 20 people. So get in quick if you want to find out more about that. Okay, let's go to some questions. Whilst you are firing your questions in, I'll just put up on the screen. That's my Rev Up for the Week email. So I mentioned that at the beginning. I do an email every Sunday, 4:05 p.m. Just pick the time randomly. And the idea is it's like one productive or positive idea for the week ahead. So the idea is you either read it on the Sunday evening or you read it Monday morning for the week ahead. It's totally free. So you're going to sign up for that. Let's look for some questions. Okay, so scanning back through here. Graham, when looking at projects and throwing outcomes actions down and ordering them, etc., is there a good method/platform you've found for this? I've used Trello, but I found it can get cluttered and busy very quickly. Yes, Dominic. So I think there's 2 things I'd say. I'll give you what I use. The other thing I would say though is that people just like different stuff. So there are actually a couple of YouTube videos on the Think Productive channel. Which I think one of them is called like which app to use, and it just kind of shows you inside the different apps. So just give you like just a tour of a few different ones. So there's definitely something to be said for find the thing where you don't feel like it's work using it, where you don't have friction, where you feel like I can just focus on the stuff that's in it rather than how to use it. Because if you get caught up in that kind of like, oh, I know I really should be using this app, but it's a bit fiddly and I don't like it, find one that you do like, because I think that's a really important thing to say. The one I use is called Todoist. It's one of the more popular ones. I just think it's the best in terms of it being like really clear, being able to move things around. It just has a really nice user interface that I really like. Some people find it a bit too much, and there's a simpler one which I've also used called Nosby, which I used for many years. The other one I would suggest you have a look at as well is just Microsoft Todo. So if you're in the kind of Microsoft Office Office 365 kind of world, you'll have Microsoft To Do somewhere on your Office suite already, and it's actually pretty good. There are better ones, I think, but you can do a lot worse than Microsoft To Do. So I think Todoist is my favorite. Nosby for the simple like Fisher Price, clunky buttons kind of one, and Microsoft To Do just because it's free and it's there. Todoist costs can't remember how much it costs, but I think it's like £25 a year. It's something in that sort of range. It's not a huge expense, but I would definitely suggest with Nosby or Todoist, get the premium one. The free one will not do. Like you will need to pay for that, but it's like the price of a coffee or two every month for like total mental clarity. I think that's a good deal. Juliet was also asking about to-do list apps, so I feel like that's been answered. And Helen is answering that, also saying Todoist. You're using the simple free version. Wow, Juliet, like Helen, if you're getting away with the free version, props to you. Because I think it's really important to have the big one. Yes, and Milan actually making exactly the same point. For the little that it costs every year, like it is like total mental clarity. And someone else talking about to do. You guys are doing my job for me today, man. Like, what can I add to this? I also use it. Do you have, Adrian's asking, do you have any ideas for creative thinking, ways of improving productivity? Yeah. Do I have any ideas for creative? Well, there's so much you can say about this. I think there's one idea I really like. So there's a guy called Shed Simove, funny name. So just as in Shed, and then Simove is like Simove, and he has a really good sort of keynote talk or TED talk that I'm sure you can find on YouTube, where he just talks about different techniques for creativity. He's basically like a kind of product designer, and his particular area is novelty gifts. So he has one which is like the word FUCK on a little kind of helicopter thing, and he says this is a flying FUCK and stuff like that. So he just has all these like stupid like novelty gifts. But one of his messages is the best way to think about creativity is to take two completely separate ideas from different parts of the world, different parts of life, and putting them together. So like if you look at the first ever iPhone pitch that Steve Jobs did, he was like, this is a phone and it's an internet provider and it's an iPod. And by putting those things together, it's like, wow, like we've got something new that's different, that is just the next iteration that takes one of those things further, or like make something that takes all the good parts of those two things. So one of the things I use around that, which is I just think it's like a really nice way to think about it, is like, so if you're doing, let's say like the launch of a new book, or like you're kicking off a new program at work, is like think how would a Hollywood director think about this? How would a charity worker think about this? How would Mickey Mouse think about this? Like almost like just trying to look at the same problem through loads of different lenses. What would the EasyJet version of this, the no frills version of this look like? What would the complete like money is no object version of this look like? How would this look if it was physical versus non-physical? Like, so just kind of asking yourself different questions about the same problem, I think, is often a really good sort of starting point around creativity. And for me, the other one, like really, and it's like really simple thing, but like post-it notes, like just getting it all out of your head. I find post-it notes, just I have 100 ideas when I have post-it notes, and when I'm in the middle of a book writing process, my entire wall is just absolutely covered with post-it notes. That is like the thing that really helps me. How do you work with personal and work productivity when you can't combine them for legal or data protection issues and have one second brain? So thank you, Alistair. That's a really good question. We do often cover that on 6 Weeks to Ninja, actually. So this is the thing that happens a lot. So if you're in a kind of industry where you want to put all of your work items onto, let's say, Microsoft To Do, but you're then not allowed to access that away from work, or you're not allowed to put work stuff into some other third-party software like Todoist or whatever. So this is a problem that does come up a fair bit. So one of the things I talk about in Productivity Ninja, there's a whole chapter called Review. And one of the key aspects of review is having a weekly checklist where every week you're just going through, this is the stuff that I'm working on. You're going through project by project and having a look at what you're actually working on, just reviewing where you're up to, but also doing some planning ahead. So I think if you need to have two different systems, so I've worked over the years with a lot of people who will have all of their work stuff on something like Microsoft Todo, and their personal stuff will be either on a different app or it'll be on pen and paper or in a bullet journal or whatever. I think the review part once a week is the time where, because you kind of need to bring all that stuff together. Like you kind of need to know for the rest of the week that like I'm really in tune with what my commitments are. And sometimes your commitments on your personal life side will affect your work and vice versa, right? So we kind of need to bring that together just so we can really just get a sense of that kind of bigger perspective of like, how's the next week going to go? So I think having some questions on your weekly checklist that basically just say, make sure I'm looking at the work stuff, make sure I'm looking at the personal stuff, and then make sure I'm looking at the calendar with both of those things in mind. I think for me, that's the way to handle that. So yeah, ideally, my advice would be if you can have all of your personal stuff and all of your work stuff all in the same second brain. But if you can't do that for those kind of data protection reasons, legal reasons, then that's definitely not a bad way around it. Adrian also asked, how can you not let a bad experience in an industry/job dent your productivity and passion for other projects? Oh man, I hear you, Adrian. That's a really good question. So how can you not let that bad experience? Well, I mean, I'm an optimist, right? Like just in life generally. And I think the optimistic part of me will be screaming right now. There'll be other good experiences in that industry, or even in that job, but more likely because people join organizations and people leave bosses. You might need to leave and find a new home with a new boss that you really feel like you gel with more. But I think just the knowledge that there will be good experiences out there. And without getting too sort of emotional intelligence on this, I think often when we face situations of trauma or difficulty, a big part of the healing is getting back on the bike and doing that same thing again, right? So if you had a bad experience in a job, the quicker actually you can get back on and kind of heal that by having a really good experience somewhere else, rather than letting that fester so long that it just becomes, just an even bigger trauma in your head. I think that can be a really, really important thing to do. So find the people that give you that permission to jump back on the bike and have another go in a better environment, I think would be a really good response to that question. Helen asks, how do you create and build in enough realistic reactive time to respond to stuff from left field? I'm good at producing my list, but always end up rolling things forward. Yeah, so one of the things I do is so I talked earlier about making space for what matters. One of the things I do every day is the morning part of my day is blocked out and it just says create. And the idea is that's the time where I do my really creative work, do my writing, all that sort of thing. But it also gives me that buffer that like I'm not back to back in meetings all day. Now, I'm not saying that's the thing that you can do, right? So that's just how I do it. But I think having some stuff that's in the diary that means that you don't book over it and also your colleagues don't book your time. That's a really good way around it, I think, to just make sure there's always buffer time. For example, like how many people have either the word lunch in their diary every day or the word doing emails in their diary every day? But those things have to happen, right? So it's like when we really look at the diary in that way, it's really helpful to just put some buffers in there just to really help with that. Right, I'm just moving over. I realized I've been on the chat and there's also stuff in the Q&A. So I'm just gonna have a look through the Q&A stuff. Someone's saying, where's the one about the also, shouldn't you plug your AI bot? Enjoyed playing with that a couple of weeks ago. Thanks, Steve. So if you haven't played with my robot friend, he's called askgraham.ai. Askgraham.ai, and literally he is the AI version of me. So we've like fed it all of my different books and blogs and everything else, and he knows more than I do because I actually forget stuff, but Ask Graham AI just never forgets anything. So if you haven't checked it out, it's a really fun little free tool. Just go to askgraham.ai. Glad you enjoyed playing with that one, Steve. Let's have a look. Jamie Smith, do you have any suggestions for decision paralysis / freezing when it comes to taking action? This is after items have been well documented in the second brain, using the dust analysis and still just feeling inaction. Yeah, okay. So I think two things. That might be slightly an intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation thing. So you might need the accountability from someone else to just drag you over the start line and then get started. I quite like. There's a thing. I think Tony Robbins was the one who first said this is like if you're. This is more for like if you're not quite sure what to do. But he has this thing where he's like, if you start having that conversation with yourself and it's like, what should I do here? I don't know. Then your next question to yourself should be, well, what would you do if you did know, or what would you say if you did know? And I think there's something about that, like just the idea of like, how can you almost like trick your brain into starting? That even if you do know, like you've done the dust analysis, I hear you, like you really feel like you know what you should be doing and you're not doing it. It's like finding that little trick that just gets you started. I think once you have momentum, it changes. So a good example of that would be just saying to yourself, I'm just going to do the first 5 minutes of this. So just do, and just, it somehow makes it a bit less scary, and somehow makes it a little bit easier. I'm only going to do the first 5 minutes of this. So that's just a nice little sort of way to trick your brain. But if you can also involve other people, if it's more of an extrinsic motivation thing, just asking like someone at home or someone at work to just hold you accountable a little bit. I'm going to have started this today. And then your bigger fear is you don't want to look bad to them. So you'll probably start. So it's just a couple of answers to that. But yeah, what do you guys think? If you've got any other techniques that work for you on that, just put them in the chat, please. I'm deliberately not reading out the anonymous one that is looks like it's praise. I don't like reading out praise. How do you get the most? So if I skip past that bit, how do you get the most from others, other than suggesting they read the book themselves? Yeah. So, well, I mean, a really great way is sign up for 6 Weeks to Ninja. I think often just spending a bit of time like just spending a bit of time on this stuff and kind of treating it as it's a project, right? Like it's a project to improve my productivity. I see it as like something that we should all see as a constant improvement opportunity. Like no one's ever finished when it comes to productivity. Like no one gets it perfect. And also everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn when it comes to productivity. So we all screw up. We also all have our strengths. And so seeing it as something that you can have regular conversations with other people about, I think really that's a big sort of part of the value of the work that Think Productive does and 6 Weeks to Ninja is like bringing people together to just kind of spark those ideas. Because also the way that you'll solve it in your organization might be slightly different from in someone else's. And so like having that kind of, particularly when we go in and we do in-house stuff and we have a team of accountants in one organization talking about this kind of stuff, it's like, there's so many like hidden gems of like ways that will really help that like only one person's thought of, but like everyone can benefit from. So I think that's a really, really important thing. We are out of time. Wow, that flew. I'm going to do my usual thing, which is I do a little thing called After Dark. So we're due to finish at 1:45. If anyone wants to stick around for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to stick around too. So I'm going to finish the formal part of the webinar here. So if you've got to go, thank you for joining in. We'd love to see you on 6 Weeks in Ninja. Go and play with the askgraham.ai robot, which is free. And anything else you want to find out about, it's grahamallcott.com/links. Thanks for being here. And for those of you still around, this is the bit where I turn the recording off. Thanks, everybody.